Welcome, foolish mortals, to Disney Coast to Coast. I'm here to introduce your host, your Disney Coast to Coast host. Kindly raise your volume, please. Jeff has plenty of Disney chatter for everyone. There's no turning back now.
Hey folks, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast, the ultimate unofficial Disney fan podcast. I'm Jeff DePaoli, and today on the show, I have one of the authors of the book Be Our Ghost, Jacob Floyd, joining me to chat about some of the alleged ghost stories from around the Disney parks. We are officially into the spooky season since October has arrived, so I figured this would be a fun way to get into the spirit. The scary tales are coming your way right after this. Audible is the leading provider of spoken word entertainment and audiobooks, ranging from bestsellers to celebrity memoirs, news, business, and self-development. But did you know that they also have ghost story audiobooks? Get yourself a free audiobook over at audibletrial.com/DCTC. That's right, no matter what title you choose, whether it's a Disney title, a ghost story, or anything and everything in between, you can get yourself a free audiobook just for visiting audibletrial.com/DCTC. That's audibletrial.com/DCTC. So get yourself those scary stories, turn out the lights, put on some creepy music, light a candle, and get yourself in the spooky mood with audibletrial.com/DCTC.
It's time to dive into today's Disney dialogue.
Hello, Jacob, and welcome to Disney Coast to Coast. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. Now, you and your wife wrote a book called Be Our Ghost, with a very cute title there, and it's ghost stories about, ghost stories in the Disney parks and such. But you have been a big fan of ghost stories, not just in the Disney parks, long before that other thing. So I'm just curious to start off, when did that start for you? How did you get into that kind of paranormal world?
Well, the paranormal topic was an interest of both mine and Jenny's before we knew each other. And we got into it recently together in about 2015 when we went on a paranormal investigation with some folks. We did a few of our own and decided we wanted to write a book. We started a couple of tours in our area, and we had a few books published with small presses. And then we ended up opening our own press. We have a few presses now for different genres. And Be Our Ghost was, I think, the second or third book we wrote ourselves for that press. And it's kind of just been all from there.
Very, very cool. Now, of course, it is the perfect time of year to be talking about all of this spooky fun, but I do want to say, and you say this in your book over and over again, that a lot of these stories we'll be talking about today are, unconfirmed stories. These are not necessarily 100% true, but they are stories that people tell or experiences that they say they've had. So for today, we're just having some spooky fun for the Halloween season, right?
That's right. We like to differentiate ourselves from, we just basically like to say we're just telling the stories. We're not saying we experienced it, and we're not saying it's definitely true or it's not true. It's just stories we pick up.
Yeah, now, where did you get most of these stories? Did you talk to people, like, one-on-one, or were these things that you found on the internet? Where did you get the stories from?
Some of them it's a variation. Some of them were stories we saw on YouTube videos. Some of them we got off the internet, and others we actually spoke to cast members who either they experienced something or they know someone who experienced something at either Walt Disney World or Disneyland. So we kind of just put it all together. You
should just wear a button whenever you're in the Disney parks that, says, tell me your Disney ghost story, and see if people stop you, and then just record it.
Yeah, that would be awesome. That's a good idea. I think we might just do that next time we're down there.
Now, I want to talk about a bunch of the stories you have in this book. Let me ask you, actually, if are any favorites that you want to talk about first.
Yeah, of course, I like the Haunted Mansion story. I'm fans. My wife and I are both fans of the ride, and I also like the story of the ghost in the Stetson hat as well. All
right, well, let's start with the Haunted Mansion stories. Why don't you share some of those with the listeners?
Well, one of my favorite ones is the one about the woman who, well, it's sad, really. It's not, but she spread her son's ashes on the ride, and even though they cleaned it up, people have said that they've seen a boy standing there and riding. There's even a picture a man caught of a young boy leaning out from the seat in front of him, and he was leaning out pretty far. And the question is, of course, that could have been any kid, right? But there's a bar on that ride. He was leaning out pretty far, so it must have been a rambunctious kid. But some people believe that could have been the child's ghost. A cast member has seen a boy standing there crying, and when she went to go find him, he was gone. So that's some pretty interesting stories there. Some of my favorites.
Yeah, it's interesting the amount of times I've heard people tell stories about people spreading ashes in these attractions and such. And I mean, I feel like you hear that all the time, and people have done it in Pirates of the Caribbean, supposedly. Yep. And it's interesting how many people want to spend their afterlife in a Disney park. I can't really blame them, I would say.
Right, people love it in life. I mean, why not be like, hey, if I do have a ghost, leave me a Disney World or Disneyland. Either one.
Exactly. So, that's the Haunted Mansion, of course, is like the perfect setting for it. And what were some of the others that you really enjoyed? Star Tours was one that I found really interesting.
There's a picture, actually, of an image that they believe is a boy that was burned on the camera lens, and it was there. Someone watching the security cameras actually saw it, and they say it went away, but I don't know. I couldn't use the picture in the book, copyright issues, but I did list where the picture can be found, and I think that's pretty interesting because Star Tours, that relatively speaking, hasn't been around as long as some of the other rides, and I think it's pretty neat that they would already see a ghost there, but at the same time, it could have just been something on the camera lens.
Yeah, I've heard that argument a lot, too, of the, it's like burned image on the screen or tape, like leftover tape that's just deteriorated a bit. And you're seeing some, I don't know how that works exactly, but that does seem to be an excuse that they use a lot. Right. I'm going to assume that you believe in the paranormal, not necessarily all of these particular stories, but I'm going to assume that you do believe. True or false?
I believe in the possibility of anything until it's been disproven. However, I do believe I'm skeptical in the sense that I'm always looking for an explanation, but I keep an open mind. Just because there is an explanation doesn't mean that is the explanation. Like, you can say, well, that's an image burned on the camera lens, but can you prove that was an image burned on the camera lens? So until you can prove that, a person who believes in the paranormal could say, well, it was a ghost. They say you can't prove that. Be like, well, prove to me that was an image on the camera lens. So I understand both sides of the spectrum, but I believe more in parapsychology than I do the paranormal, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I totally believe in, an afterlife and there's something else, but I'm always amazed. I mean, I'm one of those people, I enjoy those stupid ghost shows like on Travel Channel and stuff.
Yeah.
But I recognize the fact that they're complete BS. I've, just from like having a production background and kind of seeing some of the stuff they do, I'm like, okay, well, that's BS. And then I've also talked to people who have been involved with some episodes of those shows, and like, oh yeah, it's fake. Sorry if I'm ruining this for anybody out there, but
I've heard it all the time because we live in Louisville, and you know what's in Louisville, right? Waverly. So we've heard those stories about all the people that have gone there, and that's what they always say. So
yeah, so I mean, the thing that always cracks me up with those types of shows is that they're like, you'll hear the stories of the people that work there or whatever, and they'll say, oh, well, I saw this full body ghost down the hallway and stuff. And then when you're watching the show, you don't see anything. You're like, you see an orb on the screen, or you're like, my favorite is when they record audio and it'll be like, and then they're like, oh my God, he just said I'm going to kill you.
Yeah. And you can listen to that. It always sounds like the same voice. Every recording, every show, it sounds like the same voice each time. That's kind of weird.
They're going on Fiverr and hiring this guy to be the ghost voice.
Well, there is one thing I like about Ghost Adventures, and other than the laughing at the entertainment value, one thing I do like about it, though, is that they do introduce places that really do have ghost stories and interesting histories. And I do appreciate that they do that. And I think that's a big part of paranormal for me. One of the books we wrote was called Kentucky's Haunted Mansions, which you can probably guess where we got the idea for that name.
Sure.
And there was a lot of interesting history I learned about my own state, and me and Jenny were reading through a lot of that history, and we were like, oh, wow, this is really cool. We didn't know this. So that's fun to do.
Yeah, I mean, the history of all these things is super interesting, but, when it comes to those shows, it's sometimes cringy to watch. As much as I enjoy them, it definitely gets me to yell at the screen sometimes. But
it's like professional wrestling. It's entertainment. That's what it's there for. And I enjoy professional wrestling. It's entertainment. I know they're not really fighting, right? So I mean,
they're not. What?
Yeah, what? It's really. I mean, people can really get dropped on their heads and come back.
Yeah, right. Let's talk about Pirates of the Caribbean. Tell us about that story, because that's a real interesting one.
Yes, this one is quite interesting. And, of course, the only explanation I can have for this is it's all a coincidence. There's a story that the cast members and people, the guests who ride the ride first in the morning are supposed to say, this is at Walt Disney World, they're supposed to say, good morning, George. At night, they're supposed to say, good night, George. And the reason being is that there's a ghost of someone named George who passed away and was there a lot. I think he was a staff member or a cast member. And what happens is if you don't say good morning, George, then supposedly you'll have a lot of issues with rides and stuff throughout the day. Well, when Jenny and I went on this last trip that we went to gather information, because we went on two. We went on one in August of 2018 and then January 2019. And she said, good morning, George. And we were on the ride first, and I didn't say it. And I was like, nah, that's baloney. I'm not going to say that. And then the ride broke down. And then almost every other ride, even including Splash Mountain, which from what I hear is rarely breaks down, that one broke down. Haunted Mansion, but we rode Haunted Mansion twice that day because we went back to the hotel and napped and came back at night because it broke down. And thank goodness A Small World didn't break down because that ride is creepy enough on its own. But the Peter Pan ride had difficulties. We got stuck in the middle and midair up there with that one. So it was like, okay, I'm like, well, I guess I'm going to have to say it next time we go to Disney World. I'm going to tell George good morning.
The funny thing, I've been in Pirates of the Caribbean, Disneyland, and just talking about creepy, you mentioned how creepy It's a Small World can be just on its own. But I was in Pirates of the Caribbean and all of the audio shut off, but the audio animatronic figures were still moving. And that was creepy. Yeah, if you want to talk about creepy, that actually is really creepy. Just seeing these figures, quote unquote, singing with no audio. It's really disturbing, and it's weird that it's so disturbing. I mean, we see them all the time and enjoy them, but all you got to do is shut off their audio, and it's like, what am I looking at here? This is freaking.
Somebody must have not said good morning to George that day.
I guess, but man, there must be a ghost haunting the Indiana Jones adventure at Disneyland as well as Rise of the Resistance on both coasts because
they always messing up.
Oh gosh, if that's what breaks down attractions, I'll tell you, those are two of the most haunted attractions of all time, if that's the case. Hilarious. How about, an attraction that's already scary to begin with, has a nice little ghost story to it, the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror.
Yeah, there's supposed to be a ghost out on the platform. Yeah, I believe the ghost has touched people and it freaks them out. That ride is spooky anyway. I can tell you a story about when I was on there one time. It's not a ghost story. This was before I was aware that it had a different number of dips, right? You don't know what number you're going to get when you ride it. And we had rode it once, and we had only dipped twice, I think, or 3 times. And my wife, she didn't like it. It don't mess with her. So I went back again to ride it by myself. This was several years later. And I was on there, and it just kept rising and dropping and rising and dropping, and did it. I felt like it did it like 11 times. And I was like, is this ride broken? I thought someone had broke the ride, and it just kept going up and down, up and down. But, you know, it was a lot of fun. But I felt like I was, like, when I got off, I was walking, I felt like a ghost. I was like all, you know, felt like I was waddling up and down in the air. It was really wild.
Yeah, it's a fun ride, and it's honestly the ride that, not anymore, I love it now, but like before I rode it, it was the ride I was most scared of. And I can remember going to Walt Disney World for numerous years after it had opened and just like refusing to get on the thing, just because like it's terrifying. That drop is terrifying. So
Yeah.
I, you know, as a teenager at some point, I was like, forget it, I'm going to do it, especially since I'm like so into Imagineering and the special effects and stuff. And I'd heard such cool things that happen in the attraction outside of the drop. So I was like, for that reason, I'm like, I need to check this out. And now I love it. And, but I can remember the first time I rode it in Florida, where they have like that whole fifth dimension sequence, and you see that beam of light split the black in half, and you like go through it, and you can like feel the air conditioning go away because you're in like that outdoor shaft. And I just remember freaking out. I was not expecting for the elevator to move forward out into the fifth dimension.
Yeah.
You know, like that is such an unnatural direction for an elevator to move. So that like freaked me out more than anything, because I just pictured myself like falling over the ledge. And I was like, well, success. You scared the crap out of me. But then
You're like, oh my God, is it broken? Is it going out the window?
I mean, well, that's kind of what it feels like, you know? So I ran right back on after and loved it, and I've done it many times since. These days, the attraction that I refuse to ride again is Mission Space, because it's way too claustrophobic for me. And
I won't ride that one. Isn't that the one that someone allegedly got sick on or something?
Yeah, you know, I've heard that there's so many stories. In fact, we'll talk about some of them. But, you know, of course, Disney parks being, it's Fantasyland, but at the same time, it's the real world, and people have passed away in the parks for numerous reasons.
That's what I thought.
And I do remember, I feel like a young person may have had a heart attack on Mission Space or something, which is so sad. Let's talk about, Main Street USA. Main Street USA had such a cool story to me with the Victorian woman walking up and down the street. Now, which Main Street was this? Was this Disneyland or Walt Disney World? You heard the story.
This one is Disneyland.
Yeah, and where did you hear this story from?
We were told this one, we were given a little bit of information on it from someone at the Walt Disney World Park. Because I guess, you know, they know people from Disneyland, or maybe some of them worked in Disneyland. I don't know the full backstories to these. But we looked it up, and you can find it online. I don't remember where I found it. Our bibliography in the back is huge. And, so the story basically in a nutshell is that there's a woman in Victoria dress. People have seen her walk by them. They thought, what the heck, this is weird. Why is this woman dressed like this? And you know, she'll just kind of keep going, and she doesn't really acknowledge people. But the best part about it is that kids have supposedly been, lost kids have been led back to, you know, the office or whatever by this woman, and they have described her before, and it's happened on more than one occasion, as the story goes. And I guess the main belief behind that story is that this woman's not actually a Disney World or a Disneyland ghost, that she's actually tied to the land long before Disneyland was built. And I think that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I loved the fact that, you know, the story goes that the kids were led to Lost and Found by this woman. And when they, you know, when cast members ask, hey, how did you get here? Like, who brought you here? Their answer, they describe the same type of woman. Like, I don't care if that's fake or not. I just think that's a great story and awesome.
It's a great tale.
And they do say that kids have, you know, like that sixth sense much more than adults. So if anybody was going to see a ghost walking around Disneyland, it would probably be a kid over an adult, which, you know, pretty cool. Yeah.
Well, I certainly believe in residual energy. I think, because as a parapsychologist follower, I wouldn't call myself a parapsychologist because I've never actually studied officially, just on my own time. They believe in the human energy causes most things, whether they're exorcisms or hauntings. It's either that or it's electromagnetic fields that cause a lot of things. And I believe that a human energy can be left behind, and you can see their imprints. I think that's possible, and I think some people have the ability to. I think every person has the ability to do it, just like everybody has the ability to sing. But some people can do it better than others. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And my wife, she can really see a lot of that stuff.
Has she ever seen it at the Disney parks?
Not at the Disney parks, no.
Oh man, we got to find out like what the most haunted hotel is at the Disney parks and get you guys to stay there. That's what
Yeah.
So let's talk about Walt Disney's ghost, because of course this is something that everybody talks about, and this is one of those things I think everybody just wants to see Walt Disney's ghost. So stories are made up about it, right? And
Right.
it would certainly be cool if he was still hanging around there, and if anybody should be just hanging around there, it should be Walt Disney. But what are some of the stories? I know there have been some videos online that like really kind of went viral and stuff. The one I'm thinking of was somebody walking around the grounds or exiting the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland and kind of walking the grounds of the park, right?
Yes, they have. And if you watch the video, it's pretty interesting because this figure, and you can tell they're transparent, like, and you can see the light or whatever coming up and down from them. And they walk through gates, they walk on water, they walk, whoever this is, they just keep walking, and they do it through all the cameras. And people have said that that's Walt Disney's ghost at Disneyland. And while others say it's just a security guard imprinted on another security camera, that's on new tape. And that's an argument that I'll usually be like, okay, that's possible. But in this case, I do have to say, even as someone who's somewhat skeptical as I am, I find that hard to believe because it's just him burnt all the way through the video and passing through different cameras. That's kind of strange. So I don't know what to think about that. I think, if anything, it's residual energy that was caught on camera.
Here's the thing that's crazy to me is like, that is, first of all, that's amazing. If it is what people like to think it is, that's amazing. And number two, like, I feel like if even if the Walt Disney Company knew, oh my gosh, that actually is Walt's ghost walking around, they'd be like, okay, don't tell anybody. This is bad marketing or whatever. But
more ghosts will bring people in. You probably see more, but you get those people that come in with all their equipment though and disrupt everything.
That's exactly what I was going to say. I think it would be a great marketing ploy. I mean, gosh, how many haunted places like the Lizzie Borden house and, the Queen Mary ship in Long Beach and all of these haunted places where you can like stay overnight that people clamor to.
Oh yeah. They could charge out the wazoo for paranormal teams to come out there. I mean, if Waverly can make $1,000 per group, then imagine what Disney World could make per group.
So I think if there are any real ghosts there and the Walt Disney Company knows it, I'd say take advantage of it because there's definitely a demographic that would enjoy that and pay for it. So
and of course that's not the only story about Walt's ghost though. There's another one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Yeah, that's the one, his old apartment in the firehouse on Main Street.
Yeah.
There's that light, supposedly, that used to turn back on every time someone would turn it off. And so they just left it on. And then there's people, one of the maids, or one of the cleaners there thought she heard his voice whisper something to her. And a psychic who went in there said the phone rang while he was in there and no one was on the other line. Water faucets were turning on by themselves. So there's stories to the Walt Disney World apartment too, or the Walt Disneyland apartment, excuse me. Yeah,
now the story there, the lamp is there and it's always lit, and the story goes that this is to remind people that Walt's still here and all this stuff, and that because Walt used to leave it on when he was there. But I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I've heard that like when Walt was there, that lamp didn't even exist. That was something that was like put in afterward, and that they kind of like, this myth became part of the story. But I don't know which is true and which isn't personally, but I have heard that like that's complete BS. I don't know.
It probably is. Probably.
But, it's a good story. It's fun. And also, I love the sentiment. Just the sentiment of having the lamp lit there and, Walt's home, essentially, watching over his park, I think is a beautiful sentiment. But whether or not the lamp was actually there during Walt's day is apparently questionable. I don't know. I don't know who would be the person to answer that. I guess some old photographs could answer that question of when Walt was like hanging out in there, but I don't know. I've heard both. What are some other attractions that you really enjoy their ghost stories?
I like Mr. One Way on the Space Mountain.
Oh, okay, sure, yeah. Tell that one.
There's videos online of this image of a man that gets into one of the cars on Space Mountain. He's transparent. He walks right through the door and he just sits down, and they call him Mr. One Way because they only see him going that one way. And honestly, though, I was watching the video and it looked to me like that was an instance of a reflection or some kind of something burned in, because it looks like a man just gets in there and sits down and writes. So that one's easy to debunk, but it's still a story I like because I just think it's interesting that they caught, anytime they catch something on video, it's neat to see.
Now, the People Mover is one that I've heard over and over again. People talk about the deaths that have happened on this attraction, usually because people are like hopping out of their carts or standing up or something, doing stuff they shouldn't be doing. But I've heard those stories so many times. Once again, whether or not they're true, I don't know. Although we should say that there are some official records of people who have been, died in a Disney park. Which, of course the company doesn't want out there, and you can completely understand why. But
right.
The People Mover has some interesting ghost stories.
Now, when it comes to the people who have passed away, we mentioned in the book, too, that this is rumor or that we've actually seen where it's been, official. Because some things are just probably made up. But, a park's so big, something's bound to happen because people like to act silly, and then they do something, they're a little careless, and they fall off or get caught, crushed. Those are the two stories there. Now, the ghost story that I can remember is somewhere around that area. The ghost of a boy will basically tease the girls. He'll pull on their hair and do things of that nature. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to think on that People Mover that there could still be someone lingering in the vicinity with such tragedy having taken place, according to the legend.
Now, remind me again, was that the Walt Disney World one or the defunct Disneyland one?
I do believe that there's a story for both. Well, I think one of them is Walt Disney World, and I believe that's the one where the ghost is actually in the vicinity of the People Mover, but not on the People Mover, and that's the one that pulls the girl's hair. And the other one is Disneyland, and that's the one where I think they've actually seen, or heard ghosts on there.
There's a story about the Carousel of Progress building in Disneyland that actually isn't in your book, and I'm curious because this is like kind of a well-documented death that happened, and it's the the Carousel of Progress, right?
Oh yeah, yes, I know that one.
Okay, so
I know the story though.
Yeah, so the building that is in Disney, this happened in Disneyland, and I believe at the time when this actually happened, it wasn't Carousel of Progress at the time, it was a show called America Sings. So it's the show that that replaced Carousel of Progress. And this, I guess they rotated the building in the opposite direction that they did from Carousel of Progress. And a cast member was essentially standing in the wrong place, and as the rooms spin to take you from scene to scene, got crushed between the two, the walls essentially. I don't know if there's any ghost stories associated with that, but still kind of scary.
Yeah, I believe that there is. I think this is one we heard after we'd already published the book. We had heard the death story before, but we hadn't heard any ghosts. And if I'm not mistaken, I think that they say that you can hear her screams on there now. I think that's the case. And we're going to do a second edition because we've had some other ghost stories come to us. And we're going to do a second edition with a new cover, so we're going to probably include that one in there.
What are some of the other attractions that you're adding in the second edition?
Well, I'll wait to talk about that. We'll wait till the book comes out for that one because we have to officially confirm that. Because when we get ghost stories, we try to contact as many people as possible, or we try to look it up as much as possible because we don't want to get a story that just somebody made up on their blog or something, you know what I mean? And it didn't really happen, or some creepypasta Reddit thing, so we try to go into that. But we've heard some different things about another Tower of Terror. We've heard stuff extra about Haunted Mansion. And of course, that Carousel of Progress, like you were talking about, and it's it's going to be, hopefully, we're hoping that these check out, because we really would like to add these stories to there, but we don't want to put anything that's like off the wall and really stupid, just some, some Joe made it up,
Now, the one that I think was confirmed, I think there are records on this, correct me if I'm wrong, but the story you tell about the monorail and somebody like walking on the track, that's insanity to me.
Yeah, that really happened. That was true. There's and why, you got to think this gentleman's mind must have been altered on something, because they broke it. They basically crossed into there and got up on the monorail and was walking on the track, and the monorail hit him. And this was
Disneyland?
I think so. I think it was Disneyland, yes. And now they say that sometimes the driver can see the ghost, the monorail, and he jumps out of the way or something. And I'm like, the ghost part of that story is not really very spectacular, and usually something that small, we try to just kind of, but the story to it is just so bizarre. Like, somebody actually did this. Like, this really happened.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow.
That is nuts. I think my favorite ghost story in your book has to be Countdown to Extinction. I want one of those photos, is what I'll say.
Yeah. The man with no eyes. Yeah, that one is, to me, I have to think that that's probably just a mess up in the photo, but it's a funny story. It's a good one. That supposedly there's a picture of a man who has no eyes, ghost on there with no eyes.
Yeah, well, I love the fact that you mentioned how, like, people claim that, like, they'll see this man sitting next to them, and he just looks straight forward and doesn't respond to them and stuff, and they can, like, see him, and then they'll take the photo and he'll be there, but then he disappears. Like, listen, this one sounds completely far-fetched to me, but that's why I'm like, I think that this is cool, and frankly, I want that to really happen. That would be fantastic.
And that's kind of why we included it, because at first we were like, this is so ridiculous. There's no way this is even remotely true. But, we don't like to say that people are making things up. We try not to say that, but sometimes I usually call it a misinterpretation of the events. So I don't know what else to say about that, but it was just so, to me, this story is comical. And I was like, we got to put this. We were like, we got to put this in here. This is just too good.
You like to say a misinterpretation of the events. I will go as far as to say, like you said about the man on the monorail track, perhaps an altered mind as they were riding these attractions. Who knows what they were doing before they entered the Disney parks?
Because there's a whole lot of people in the world and a whole lot of mind-altering devices. So
exactly.
they find each other pretty well. So.
Yeah, it's crazy. Let's talk about the Wilderness Lodge, because you stayed there a couple of times and have a couple of stories connected with that.
The story I really thought was funny is, as the weird alarm that went off in the middle of the night, and no one knew who pulled the fire alarm, because we were there and we woke up and I don't know if you've ever heard their fire alarms at the Wilderness Lodge in Walt Disney World, but it sounds like the robots or aliens have invaded and they're taking over the hotel. And they're like, and you hear this voice like, please get to the lower floor, please exit. And it's just like, it sounds really ominous. And it woke us up at like 3 in the morning anyway, which is, the witching hour. So, we started poking around and asking questions. We were like, was that a scheduled fire alarm? Or was that a scheduled fire drill? And they're like, no, we wouldn't schedule a fire drill at 3 o'clock in the morning. And they're like, we don't really do that anyway. And I guess they have their own people come and check. I didn't ask them the background on that. And it's like, well, did they ever find out who did it? And they're like, well, no one has a clue. They were trying to find out. And I was asking different people all around. Of course, they're not going to tell me, who did it anyway. Still, I'm just like, wow, that's really weird.
Yeah. Let's go back to an attraction that you just find scary in general, but there is a ghost story associated with it, and that's It's a Small World.
Yes, apparently the dolls come to life on their own. They will sing and bounce around on their own when the place is closed. And I think someone believes, there's some people that believe it's the ghost of a staff member that really loved that ride and loved that place, causing their energy, causing the dolls to move around. And to me, something like that may not be super far-fetched in the sense that those dolls run on energy, right? They run on electricity. And as someone who believes in the power of the human energy, maybe that could happen. Maybe someone's imprinted energy can be around and possibly cross paths with an electronic device and make it work. I think that's kind of how spirit boxes work. I think that human energy imprints, residual energy, can be manipulated by other human energy to seem intelligent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
And like, say if I really truly believe with all my heart and soul that I'm in a haunted place and I'm talking to a spirit and their imprinted energy comes across me and I'm like, blah, 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 that this happened, my own energy can manipulate it to say, yes, I kind of believe that's possible. Who's to say that energy can't be doing that? As far as it being like an intelligent ghost making the dolls come to life, some people believe in that, some people don't. I'm not going to knock either one, but it's just not the path that I usually go down. But yeah, it's an interesting story, and that place is spooky enough as it is, so I don't want to, those dolls, that chanting is creepy.
Do you go on it every time you go, just to get that?
I'm going to go on it next time we go, because I tell you what, I don't get creeped out easily, because I'm a horror writer as well.
Yeah,
and I'm all into that stuff. I don't get creeped out easily at all. And that place, those dolls, that place has gave me the creeps. But of course, when something's creepy, I want to experience it again. That's my way of doing things. So
I'll tell you what, you know how Disney likes to do like those holiday overlays of attractions to make them appropriate for certain holiday seasons. I honestly think, I know they would never do this because it would be like sacrilegious to them, but if they wanted to make a creepy Halloween version of It's a Small World, oh my gosh, like they wouldn't have to do much other than change the lighting and slow down the music,
That's it, that's all. Yeah, that's it.
You know what? I really want to see that. I think that they should do that.
They could even take it further and do backmasking. They can run the song backwards and see what happens then.
Man, that would be awesome. I would love that. That's terrifying. Before we get going here, let's talk about Peter Pan's Flight real quickly, because this is an extremely popular attraction that always has a long line in general. And apparently there's somebody that's been waiting in that line for a very, very long time.
Yeah, there's people there's someone that's remained in the back of that line for years and years, apparently, that they don't show up all the time. But people have seen this individual spirit standing at the back of the line, and even when the line moves, they're still there. And when they leave the ride after they're done, they can still see them down there. So apparently this person really, really either enjoyed Peter Pan's Flight or they're one of the people that passed away waiting, because that line has got to have the longest line in the entire park. Like Peter Pan's Flight, if you don't fast pass it, you ain't getting on. So I mean,
it's true. At Disneyland, I only really go on if it's like really early in the morning or really late at night, because otherwise it's an insane line for a super short ride.
It blows my mind. Like, I can't believe that line is so long like that. It rivals Splash Mountain every time. I think it's longer. I don't know. I've seen a 3-hour wait on Splash Mountain.
I think people just want to fly. I think that's what it comes down to.
It's fun. It's a fun ride. I mean, you probably get a lot of repeaters going on there because it's fun flying over all that stuff in your little cart.
Yeah. So what if you had the chance to be haunted by any attraction in a Disney park? Which is the attraction that you'd really love to be haunted in? Or if there's any of these stories in particular that like you would love to witness yourself, which would it be?
Well, for one to actually witness and see, I would like to see the Victorian woman in the mainland or Main Street, USA.
Yeah.
I like Victoria era stuff anyway, but that's just a really interesting one. But for a haunting, if I wanted to be creeped out, I would want to experience creepy It's a Small World stuff because I'm already creeped out by it in the first place. So I'd kind of like to, and I feel like I've already experienced George, so, so I can't do that. But yeah, I would like to see It's a Small World because it's creepy anyway, so that would just add to the creep factor.
That's funny. Awesome. Well, these are such fun stories. Like I said, perfect for the Halloween season. And thank you for sharing them. Where can folks get this book if they want to read more about these stories? And do you know when the second edition is planned to come out?
The second edition should be out. We're hoping before the end of this year. If not, it'd be early next year. But it should be very soon if everything goes accordingly. To find it, you can go to Amazon and find VR Ghost, or you could actually visit the you can message the Anubis Press Facebook page and just send us a message, and you can just order it that way through us, whichever way suits one best.
Who came up with the name BR Ghost?
I did. We were sitting around trying to think of names for it. Originally, we were wanting to call it the happiest haunted place on earth. That's already been used.
Oh, really?
So we were, well, crap. So we were like, well, and I said, what about BR Ghost? Because we like Beauty and the Beast so much. And I was like, BR Ghost, that would work. I sometimes kind of wish, though, that we would have put BR Ghost, Tales, Ghost, Disney, whatever, because sometimes people think it's a fiction book. So by the title, and I'm just like, oops.
Well, listen, you got a volume 2. You can do whatever you want with volume 2.
That's right.
Excellent. Well, that's going to wrap up the ghost stories for today. Hopefully, that gets you in the spooky, Halloween-y mood. So now let's get to some trivia.
Do you know the answer? Get your brain gears churning and play along. It's trivia time.
Alrighty, Jacob, do you want to hit me with a trivia question first, or shall I hit you?
You can go ahead and hit me first.
Okay, so you're talking about ghosts in Disney, so I have to talk about one of my favorite ghosts of all time in fiction. So I want to know, which iconic Disney character portrayed one of my all-time favorite ghosts, Jacob Marley, in Mickey's Christmas Carol? Do you know what Disney character played the role of Jacob Marley in that story?
Yes, it was Goofy.
You're right. It was Goofy. And I think that A Christmas Carol is one of the absolute, not only one of the best stories of all time, but obviously one of the best ghost stories of all time. I think it's fantastic. And yeah, so Goofy played Jacob Marley. I love that character so much. And out of the 4 ghosts that Scrooge meets in that story, Jacob Marley is my favorite. So
yeah, it was a good one. That's one of my favorites.
Cool. So what's your trivia question for me?
I was going to ask you roughly the same thing about the Muppets Christmas Carol, but I'll do something else. I'll do another.
That's so funny that we both did it. That would have been Statler and Waldorf, right?
Yep, that's correct. All right, so who played the butler in Haunted Mansion?
Oh gosh, the ghost of the butler who... Oh gosh, I don't know the actor's name. I can visualize him. What was the actor's name?
Terrence Stamp.
What else has he been in?
The thing I know him from is playing John Tunstall in Young Guns in 1988. That's where I know him from, but apparently he'd been in a lot of stuff other than that. But
yeah, he definitely looks like one of those actors that has worked a ton, but that's a great role though in that movie. And I know lots of people don't love that movie, but the interesting thing about that movie is a lot of the story pieces that are part of that movie go back to the attraction, and because that attraction went through so much development and so many changes, and a lot of the backstories that were developed for the attraction that we may not know so much in the attraction are actually part of that movie, which I think is kind of interesting. So, and it has some great makeup. I mean, the Rick Baker makeup and stuff in that movie is fantastic. Yeah, it really is. That's a really good movie, and I like Eddie Murphy anyway. I know people have gotten sick of him over the last couple of decades, but I still enjoy his stuff. He's a funny guy. Excellent. Well, Jacob, thanks so much for coming on the show. And where can folks find you if they need to find you? We're all over Facebook. You can find us at the Frightening Floyds. I got an author page, Jacob Floyd Author, and then there's Jenny Floyd Author. You can find me on Twitter. I'm on Tumblr, author Jacob Floyd. Excellent. Thanks so much. Thanks for coming on the show. Thank you for having me on. I hope those stories got you all in the Halloween mood. If you're looking for more Halloween goodness, check out the Disney Coast to Coast Halloween playlist. I'll include a link in this episode's description. And if you haven't listened to this past Wednesday's episode, be sure to check it out, as it's all about the puppetry used in the Disney parks with Abby Cadabby's puppeteer from Sesame Street. And of course, you can catch the latest Disney news in the House of Mouse headlines every Sunday. The easiest way to make sure you don't miss any of the magic is by subscribing to Disney Coast to Coast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Wherever you search, don't forget it's Disney with a Z, Coast to Coast. Also, October is a live stream Q&A month for members of the DCTC community, so find out how you can join us for the live stream over at patreon.com/DisneyCTC. That's patreon.com/DIZNEYCTC. Other than that, folks, have a magical day. Bye!
Thanks for listening to Disney Coast to Coast. Have a magical day.
Disney Coast to Coast is produced and hosted by Jeff DePauli. Learn more about the podcast and become a supporter at DisneyCoastToCoast.com. This podcast is part of the DePodcast Network. Learn more about this show, plus find more quality and entertaining podcasts at DePodcastNetwork.com. That's DEPodcastNetwork.com.